computer.
I don't care what your hair looks like, even Jeff's.
See, it's not fair for guys to say that because they just put a hat on. I don't want to hear you say that again, Trevor. It's not fair. It's
Your hair is always great, Angela, except I like when it's up more.
It took me hours to get this
but I mean, I have to
hours.
like shower and like do stuff for that. I can't just like put a hat on and anyway, sorry.
It's a safe place.
Something that came up with one of my recent like female mentoring groups. We were like, the guys need to stop telling us to come off video and that it's fine if we look terrible. Like maybe we don't feel good about it. So
just that's why I have a hat on, you know. I didn't do my hair today.
Right.
It's a girl thing, maybe.
Oh, my guys.
All right, here comes people. I knew if we talk about background and green screens and hair for long enough, we'd get more people showing up.
Yes.
That's good.
That's the trick.
Good.
Yostis with the mostest.
There's no green screen. There's no background.
Karen,
It's
Carrie.
It's just plain.
The
See
real
the pictures
deal.
of the kids.
That's
See,
right.
it looks fine. I don't even have that. Yeah.
Love it. All right, Todd, let's kick us off. Let's dive in and make this valuable.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, what we're going to start doing is second Friday of each month will be a CLA topic that we just sort of bring on and talk about, you know, a concept or idea to keep kind of reinforcing, maybe go deeper depending on what questions you have. Give us a chance to keep sharpening that saw. Fourth Friday of each month is going to be like a fast strategy that you can roll out and just talking about how do we roll that out and make sure we're doing something successful. And then we'll do the mentor stuff on the first and the third. So it'll kind of keep it mixed up a little bit. John will kind of help lead on the fast strategies. I'll lead on the mentor stuff. Trevor will lead on the CLA because it's just good to have different people talking about it at different levels of understanding, and that's the big picture idea. All right, and Trevor picked a topic. What was your topic today, Trevor?
Just kind of from a lot of conversations. And last time, those of you that were there, watched the recording, we dove deep into safety, liquidity, and return, but we kind of ran out of time on the return piece. We spent a lot of time on really how to architect an awesome borrow smart conversation around those first three concepts. And then I always end up saying returns like a whole conversation in of itself. So this time I thought, let's really have some fun with how I've been able to have some amazing conversations with homeowners over the years around just the return piece and all the different perspectives of return. And then I'd like to not finish up without at least then talking about how all of you are leveraging this in the one-to-many way, and keeping it super simple. Like this is the time where I talk with my team, just, you know, the word planting seeds, we're all using that for so much this year, but how effectively you're planting those seeds for 2024 to me is the key. And maybe most of us here are all biased. I know I am. Just taking what we already have through the Borrow Smart University. I don't need any more content to go out there and rock the world and get them wanting to talk to me about borrowing money at some point. So you don't need to go any further. It's more than we can even talk about already here, you know, at our fingertips. So that's my thought for today. Any other thoughts on that, Todd, or you want to dive in, or
Love it.
So I'm going to try to make it conversational.
No, I like it. I'll jump in, but I'm not going to get in the way right now.
Maybe you'll learn something, Todd.
I know. I'm excited.
Just talking like Todd these days. That's all I do now.
It was fun.
Let me share my screen. Tell me if this works.
Yep.
That work?
Yes, sir.
Cool. So team, all I have done, I thought for today, I added a few new slides just for today's conversation, but I just took the Borrow Smart Lite PowerPoint that is in your CLA course. Everybody have that already or know where to find it?
Yep.
Okay, cool. There are people that go through this course and still don't know where that is. So it's just sitting there. I've given this class so many times over the years. So we're just going to talk about return. So I'm just going to go through this. Obviously, right? We always want to be able to explain to them in the simplest way from the Borrow Smart standpoint, the growth of your money over time. So if you're doing a workshop, you're sitting one-on-one with, you know, a client or a couple, what have you, teaching them what return is first, because from a positioning standpoint, let's, you know, if we're starting with the foundation of all this, the whole goal is to increase conversion rate, right? From business, if I can get more of the people I talk to choose me, theoretically, I don't need to talk to as many people. Or if I want to scale up my business, I can just keep talking to more people and convert more of them, right? Simple math. So that's why this conversation, why we spent so much time, and I appreciate some of your feedback from our last time, just like you can go 10 times deeper just around these first three concepts that I think some of you admitted, gosh, I just haven't really peeled the onion back quite that far. So y'all know this slide then, which is great, right? 2 ways to increase the money in your house. This is the typical right off of the slide. All right. So where I start to have fun, if I've got time with a client, or you're giving a presentation to a group of real estate agents, for example, or your database, is, let's talk about return from a few different perspectives and have some fun with it, because we know most people are thinking about this piece, right? My return on my house. If you've ever asked somebody, hey, what's the return on this investment or your down payment, they're going to go, well, I've heard it's going to go up, about 5% a year. So, right. They just go there typically. So what we want to do, and not to too much use the term of professionally confuse them, but also sound super smart, is say, there's a lot of ways we want to help you look at return. And so let's have some fun with this so you can really make the right investment decision, because this is a big investment for you, hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars down, possibly. So I look at it from a few different ways. We're going to talk about the down payment. What's the return on that? There's a couple of ways we want to look at the return on the down payment, right? There's that trying to avoid that cost of that 7% mortgage, right? Rate return, right? Those are the same thing from two different perspectives, as Todd teaches us. And then there's that rate of return on that big lump sum down payment over time. How many of you get into that with your clients on a regular basis? If I just stop there for a second.
I feel like that's the most eye-opening, like even with financial advisors who like understand how numbers work, when I'm like, you can use 5% or 20% to control the same asset and get like, so if you tell them to do 20%, yes, there's the payment and all the other reasons why you might, but if you tell them to do 20%, you've like cut their return on investment way down just by doing that. And they're like, wow, I never thought about it that way. So that's, even going through this course for me, that was one of the more eye-opening things.
Yeah. So we have to remember that, because Angela's spot on. You want to like blow somebody away. We're going to get to that here. This is the area I feel like you really blow somebody away. Safety conversation makes them feel warm and fuzzy, caveman, crocodile brain stuff that we're helping them feel connected to us. Liquidity. Yep. Great conversation, of course. But the different ways to look at return, and they're going to, let's just rip that Band-Aid off. They're always going to go back to, yeah, but my payment will be higher. We know it's going to go to cash flow, and that's where we're going to cap all this off anyway. So we all know that. But we already talked about safety. We already talked about liquidity. This is just helping them zoom in on return, but not just the one area of return they look at. Then we're going to talk about return on their prepayment. That's a big strategy we've all been talking about lately. But then also the rose petals leading to the bedroom, return on home equity, right? Yeah. Okay. Bad metaphor. Sorry. Return. Jeff liked that one. Okay.
I feel like there's a lawsuit in there, HR.
Some of you are so used to me. I'm sorry. Todd's he's going to cancel.
I have no HR department, so you're good.
Okay. Return on home equity, right? That's where you just left hook to the jaw, and you have a lot of fun with it because clients have just never been taught these things. So let's just kind of break down each one. How many of you use MBS Highway? Karen, no. Most of you. Carrie, kind of a raise hand. I didn't see that. I see 2 thumbs up. Cool. So I'm just going to use that real quick to show you how easy it is to just have numbers ready when you meet with a client. But I just pulled up my local zip code just right before this call. Median price 842 shows me what the return on my house is going to be potentially over the next 5 years. So the math is done for me, right? And you can go in, if you don't already know that, edit the price of the house. So if you're talking to somebody who's looking at a specific price point or a specific house, you can literally go in, type in that exact amount, and it'll do all the math for you in 2 seconds. Okay. So that just kind of gets us to this point faster. So we're going to talk about the house appreciation market, right? MBS Highway says 843 median price. The return on my house, 224. Okay, that's the dollar amount, but the return is 26.6% on this investment. Or break it down in kind of their annual terms like they're used to when they look at, what's the money market returns, what's the cost of my mortgage, 5.3% per year. Great. And you can go into that. I mean, this is the easy part, but you can go into that on that's going to happen no matter how much you put down, all that stuff. But getting them to start thinking about return, I think this is the easiest and most obvious way. And then you show them the technology where it's not just you making up numbers to look good. This is what other smart people believe is going to happen in your market. And if you have other friends in other markets, please let me know. I can pull this up for them in 5 seconds. Send it to them. And we include this with our annual financial reviews, by the way. So next year, after I help you into this house, we're going to review this on an annual basis at minimum and make sure you're tracking your wealth creation. So just some scripting around getting the client. Todd, I see your hand is up.
So yes, so I don't want to derail anything, but I always like to, when you're thinking about this as well, all right, go into the head of the person that you're talking to for a second and ask yourself, why are they in front of you, right, in that moment? Is it because they're looking to buy a house? Is it they're investing in a house? And know that the alternative on owning the house is what? There's only one alternative. If you want to live indoors, which most of us do, what are the two pathways for them?
Rent or own.
Rent or own. And if they're renting, will they make a payment? Okay. And what's the difference in this example and a rental scenario?
You actually are earning money on your investment.
Yeah.
Paying yourself.
Exactly. Like in this situation, if you were showing this, you would say, if you were renting, that picture is of the landlord's house, right? Because there's always going to be appreciation. It's just the appreciation is going to be for the person that owns that rental property. You're still paying a portion or a large portion of that debt. But there's always going to be appreciation if an asset, out there, it's who controls it, to your earlier point, and how much money was used to control that asset, which is on page 114 of the book. When she was mentioning that, that's a great table to kind of remember, because it says, hey, if I got 5% down, I'm getting 40x leverage. I'm earning a 40% return. If I control the same house with 4 times that amount, I'm getting a 10% return.
Hey, right? We're not there yet, bro.
I know. I'm sorry.
Hey,
sorry, man. Sorry, I jumped ahead. But on this part, okay, this is what I was trying to avoid. I can't help it. With this particular part here, just think about the fact that, again, someone's thinking about buying their first home, they're renting, you're still going to make the payment. There's still going to be house appreciation. What's the difference? It's not your house that's appreciating. And that's an important thing for them to sort of see and understand. It's not like it doesn't exist. It's just not existing for them.
Now that would be pertaining to first-time homebuyers, I assume.
Or if they're considering trading up, if they're looking at a new house at a new price point, either way, right? That whoever owns that house today is going to continue to get that, and you're going to continue to get what you have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So whether you keep it as a rental or not,
come into play at all?
Say again?
I said, does their rental payment come into play? And I don't want to go on a sideline, but
what do you mean? Does a rental?
How much they're paying in rent come into play?
Well, obviously from a cash flow standpoint, and the fact that, if their rent is the same as the house payment, that's huge. If it's half, it's a different conversation, but absolutely, if they're spending $2,000 a month to rent a house versus $3,000 a month to buy a house, you've got $1,000 difference. Right. Well, is it really $1,000 difference? What's the difference? And the difference is, if that house appreciates, that appreciation is offsetting that $1,000 difference. Not to mention all the other benefits of house ownership.
Right.
That's how it comes into play at that point. If a lot of the problem for some people, again, not to use it as a justification to buy when they can't afford it, But if they can afford it and they're like, I'm spending 2,000, I'm going to spend 3,000 or whatever. That's an offsetting factor. Like I could take Trevor's slide there, Trevor, if you went back for 1 second, and just say it's a 5-year game of 224. So that's roughly what, 45,000, 46,000 a year that they're earning in appreciation. Well, that's divided by 12. That's about 3,500 a month. So even if their payment was 3,500 a month more, they're still on a wealth standpoint breaking even.
Got it. Thank you.
Right? You got it.
That's good. I'm done. I can go now.
Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't like approached it from the like 1,000 higher, but really it's offset. So that's great.
Well, and if you're renting or decide to rent, this image is of your landlord's growth. That's a punch to the gut. All right. So the next, this is one I'm assuming has a pretty good grasp on this piece. Right? I mean, the value of the home using some tech. So down payment, kind of where Angela was going already as well. So talking to the consumer, the potential buyer, about the down payment, right? And they want to avoid the cost. Let's say at first, I want to avoid the cost of borrowing at 7%. I got the money, I got the cash. Why in the world would I borrow it and pay 7%? So if they do put it towards the down payment with just this little sliver of an element here, what's the return right out of the gate if they don't borrow at 7%?
It's still 7%, right?
Right? If I pay that mortgage down and I don't borrow it, my return is 7%. If the mortgage rate, the note rate, the EPR is 5%, my return's 5%. Right? Is what that's fairly easy. But I don't think the talking in these terms, I think, is the difference maker with a consumer, right? Who doesn't talk like this or have anybody else talking to them like this. Like, let's give that to them. Yes, if we put it all down, you're going to save 7%. Now, the other aspect of this down payment is what's the overall return on this chunk of money over time, right? And that's the fun piece. So spelling this out for somebody, and I'm going to take those same numbers, but I just evened out the numbers for my own math head. So let's say I buy a house at 800,000. I've now seen per the data that I'm going to make about 200,000 over the next 5 years. If I put 400,000 down to make 200,000, what's my rate of return?
50.
Who said that? Was that Jeff?
Yeah.
It's usually the fast one here. Okay. Right? 50% or on an annualized basis, 10% a year, basically you're making on your down payment. Okay. What if I put 200 down instead to make 200?
100.
Right? And yes, they're going to go to cash flow. The FAs are going to go to cash flow immediately. I'm like, yes, but come back with me. We're just talking about different options so people understand how to, if they tell me they want to make the most return on their money in any way possible, you're just showing them all the ways to think about this decision. But again, I keep saying, have some fun with it because it's a lot of numbers and some people glaze over. So you do, when you're having a real conversation, want to just make it fun for them. Like I literally would say, like, has anybody ever talked about this kind of perspective with you? No, never even thought about it this way. Great. Have some fun with it. So 20% per year on my down payment. If I put less down, knowing what, if the market's going to do what the market's expected to do, I just doubled my return on my down payment. They don't think of that down payment as an investment. They just psychologically, that's not how most people think of that chunk of money from the sale of their previous house or the gift from mom and dad or whatever it is. Now there's a lot of cash buyers out there, a lot of real estate agents saying you got to pay cash to get the house, blah, blah, blah. With rates coming down, we all kind of have been talking about hopefully that frenzy is just going to only come back because affordability will get better. There's still limited inventory. You're going to be competing to get that house. We got to put more down or pay cash. So we've got to let them know, like, that's fine. but do you understand how that impacts your rate of return on your money, that money that you right now possess? So if they pay cash, what's their return?
Zero.
They're investing $800,000 to make 200.
Oh, yeah. Don't make me.
I did some math for you if you guys can't figure it out, but you're going to get a 25% return on their money. But you've got to, like, they think cash is great. What I've done is walked them through kind of baby steps in a couple steps. Like, it might feel great. You're avoiding a payment, and we're not getting to lag yet. That's coming. Trust me, because that's my favorite thing ever. But you just dropped your rate of return to 5% a year on your actual investment to own this property. You've removed all leverage. Okay. But just from a return standpoint, how many cash buyers are thinking of it this way? How many real estate agents telling their clients to pay cash for a house are thinking about it from this perspective? So sometimes we have to realize, okay, hey, maybe you do have to pay cash to even get your offer accepted. We got 90 days. We can teach them these concepts, and they want to call it acquisition indebtedness from a tax perspective. We can do a refi and get that back in there and establish acquisition indebtedness. If you agree with me, you want to optimize this money that you've got. Any thoughts on that? Any eye openings or thoughts that how you might incorporate this from your end on this? Because I'm not seeing a lot of people go this deep on this piece of it.
I like it, Trevor. It's good.
No, I love it. I just put in the chat deferred financing. I've got
Yep.
clients who are thinking about this exact scenario right now. So it's great. Yep.
And how much more powerful it is if you're proactively educating them and prepping them for this strategy as their advisor and saying, hey, go do cash if you have to. But I want you to feel the pain of doing it. Well, let's go get the house, whatever. And as soon as we get this house, here's our plan. And lay out the plan so you don't have to resell them on anything. Like, this is just part of the overall strategy to build wealth.
What were you saying that you were calling it in regards to taxes?
Well, it's delayed financing is what our term is on the lending side, but you have 90 days to establish what's called acquisition indebtedness.
Okay, that was it. Okay.
That's the
So,
section
yeah.
121 of the IRS code that says, that the debt is part of your tax deductible kind of basis. It's got to be acquire, construct, or improve a property. You can pay cash for a house, but you've got to pull that cash out of the house within 90 days. You can do it later, but after 90 days, it loses its sort of tax preferred nature for being tax deductible.
Right. Yeah, there's other lending rules that we've talked about, Angela, on some of our internal calls about guidelines, right, after the 90 days, or using a new appraised value versus the original purchase value. That's all separate from this. The consumer is not going to care as much about that. But if you're just, again, I'll keep it honed in on just return, we want all these cash buyers to realize they're just crushing the return on their money when they do this. Because the return on the house that we already covered is going to happen no matter what, right? We already know that piece. We want them to know that piece. And we all know it, but yeah.
I was just going to say, the part of the art of this is understanding it. And then what I'll call the science, or you could say the science is understanding the concept. The art is knowing when to use this concept, right? Like, if you've got someone that's buying a house and they're putting 20% down, and they need to put 20% down to qualify and all that kind of stuff. I'm not gonna say, now let me tell you about the 20% down payment and your return. I mean, it's like, there's no real point. It's when you've got someone that's putting down 200,000 or 400,000. And I won't even go into this concept without saying, do you have a financial advisor you work with today? And if they say yes, I'll say, there's a concept I'd like to share with them, but I'd like to share it with you first, right? Because what I really want to do, I really want to have this conversation with a financial advisor or CPA or someone I can build a relationship with. but I also want to tell the client why I'm having that conversation. It actually gives you a little bit of objectivity and distance to say, I want to talk to your advisor about this, but just so you know, on that 200,000 you're putting down, to Trevor's point, you're going to earn half the return, or you're going to earn double the return of, say, putting $100,000 into the property, because you're using less cash to control that. And as he stated, the offset to that is going to be cash flow. That's where people feel the pain. But they also feel liquidity pain when they put a lot of money in the house, because they feel it later and go, man, I've got all this money tied up in the house. So they focus on the immediacy of the cash flow pain, but they don't think about the long-term impact of the liquidity pain. And that's why we're talking about return, but safety, liquidity, and return are inseparable in a conversation. You're just trying to think about which of the three is most important in that particular conversation, right? Like if someone says to the point 800,000, I could pay cash for this. Yes, you could, and you're going to earn 7% on that money by avoiding the interest, and you're going to have appreciation, but the appreciation is actually earned on the house, not on the 800,000, because the house is going to earn its appreciation whether it's financed or not. It doesn't know, but the 800,000 is going to earn the interest rate, the EPR of 7%. And this is sort of an advanced concept, but if someone paid cash for this house for 800,000, today they're earning 7%. If a year from now the interest rates were 4%, what are they earning on the 800,000?
4%.
4%, because it's the opportunity cost. At that point, they could pull the money out at 4% and do something with it. So that creates a lot of opportunities for you down the road. But in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, why is this person sitting here? And is it safety, liquidity, or return that's going to be really relevant to them at this point? And then if it's return, what is the appropriate amount of knowledge to drop on them in that moment, so that you're helping them but not confusing them, right? And that's really the art of so much of this. And Trevor's laying down the science, which is fantastic. And then I also want you to think about the artistic side as well. Like when do I really use this? What's the best time to use this in a particular situation? Yeah, Karen.
Do you ever get pushback from people who say, well, especially with where rates are now, I went to see the gain after factoring in, say rates did stay at 7% for 5 years. And what does it look like then of having to factor in the interest cost on that as well?
Are you talking about versus what they could get investments elsewhere?
Just here, as far as they're looking at it and it's saying, well, I gained 200,000, but I didn't really, because I also had to pay X amount more in interest by putting less down. So my gain really is not that good, because I was for those 5 years paying interest either on just the 200,000, I only put 200,000 down. So the extra interest on 200,000 more, or the interest I paid,
right,
I'm not paying because I paid cash, that kind of stuff.
For me, this is why I slice it all up. I want to compartmentalize it for them, right? You're going back to that the number one bullet point, which is absolutely a consideration. This piece of it here is just about the return on the down payment as a whole over time. So I have to cover those, which is kind of for me. And did Todd just disappear? Where'd he go? Oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you just moved around because you lowered your hand. Like you just went from here to here. I got it.
Yeah. When she lowered her hand, she drops down to the bottom.
Whoa.
Crazy technology.
So I think those are both conversations, and it's fun to watch where the client's head will go with all of this. That, like Todd said, the art of it, and that probably would be telling us that's what I feel is most important right now. To me, that gets back to the next piece where we're going to get to kind of the liability asset gap piece, because that is about that monthly cost of borrowing, or that annual cost at 7% of borrowing. But what they've not had anybody do is separate that from the chunk of money as a whole and thinking about that as an investment. Like nobody thinks of a down payment as an investment. So they understand they want to get a lower payment. The more I put down, I get a little bit better rate. I get a lower payment. That's all they're thinking. But they're not thinking, obviously, opportunity cost, which is where this gets a little tricky with where rates are, right now. And to Todd's point, I'm already assuming we remember our last conversation. None of this comes up until we've gone in depth about safety, then liquidity, then we get to the fun part of return. And you could spend an hour just on those first two. And then this kind of helps you kind of go, yeah, remember we talked about liquidity. How important is that? Safety might be having a chunk of that money not down on the house and sit over here, which is kind of liquidity. And you kind of weave in and out of that. But I'm assuming you've already spent part of your conversation around those first two things.
Or if you haven't talked to them at all about that, other than just explaining that this is something that you consider for them, which is equally, again, some people just saying, there are three things you know about. And I want you to know that I've considered these things for you, and that's being factored into your plan. I mean, that could be the lightest version of this conversation, is letting them know what you've done for them. And saying, if you'd like to see what I did, here's a whole bunch of information on it. You can read the book, but this is what really makes us different. Yeah. But on Karen's thing, so this is very important, because as a student, when you're learning this, you're sort of trapped in the same paradigm. And what Trevor was saying is spot on. You've got to separate, and to do that, you get good at it over time, because you simply ask questions and you say to them, okay, they're saying if they put more money down, they're saving more money. That's what I heard Karen say, right? If it's 8% interest, I want to put more money down because I'm saving what? I'm saving that 8% interest. Okay. That's only true if the money that you put down, the extra, to earn 8% is being offset by money that's sitting in a jar or in a 0% interest account. Right? Because if I can put $400,000 down versus paying cash for the house, people think they're saving money. And I'm like, yes, that's true if you put the $400,000 in a jar in your backyard. If I put the $400,000 in a financial investment account at 7% or 8%, what I'm earning the exact, there's no difference at all. I'm saving the interest on the house for the bigger down payment, and I'm earning the money over. Savings and earnings are the same on a wealth basis. If I earn 8 or I save 8, my wealth is maintaining the same sort of a thing. But because you mentioned appreciation, and that's true, but you gotta stop for a second. The appreciation is going to happen whether you put 800,000 in the house, 400,000 in the house, 200,000 in the house, or you get 100% loan. Guess what? That 200,000 appreciation, it's going to happen. That's why you want to separate it. Now, what you're concerned about is interest, because this is people live lives of cash flow. I got there through 20 years of these conversations, and interest impedes their cash flow. It's like friction. It's like kryptonite to cash flow. Interest I'm paying versus interest I'm earning. But again, if I'm paying 7% interest and I'm earning 7% interest, wait a minute, that's neutral. So we use the term balance sheet neutral. But separate those two things out for them. And you can do that with a spreadsheet. You can do it with a simple, on a napkin kind of a conversation, but make sure they understand it's not free money. They assume if I put extra money in the house, I'm saving 8% in interest. I'm like, no, you lost the use and control of that money you put in the house. They could have earned 8% somewhere else. It's not free money. And that's the way they're calculating it in their heads, right? When you net it all out, the appreciation is an offset against the cost of housing. When you own the house, the appreciation is not an offset against the cost of ownership when you rent. That's the difference. And that's why I separate. Anytime we're talking about appreciation, I separate into renting and owning, because that's the toggle. That's the on-off switch for appreciation. Cash flow, I'm going to pay cash flow whether I rent or own. Right? I'm going to either pay it as rent or I'm going to pay it as mortgage. So then it's a function of what am I going to spend there. You can net them out at the end, but make sure they understand those are two very discrete conversations. They want to put them together and talk about them like this. And you have to keep, sometimes they're like kids that are fighting. You have to keep pulling them back apart and say, wait a minute. There's over here the cash flow conversation. That's interest rate. There's the appreciation conversation. Totally separate.
Love it. I also use the term, we all have it. We have like competing intentions. I want to make money, but I want to save money, right? They kind of get in the way, and all of us have too many choices. So I think our job as advisors, like when you say things, and as your advisor, I'm looking at all the ways we can optimize your rate of return while also balancing safety and liquidity for you. But I'm also planting seeds on why you're going to want to work with me because of all the stuff I'm going to do for you after closing. I don't want them to ever be able to think, and this is the sales training piece of this, I don't want them to ever think, I only need you for this one-time decision-making process. Because that's too easy for them to take all of my advice, right? And then go implement it with somebody who's cheaper. So everything I talk about is, and I'm always saying, hey, we're going to then talk about this at minimum every year when we do your annual financial reviews, because your goals are going to change. Your income's going to change. Your financial situation is going to change. Kids are going to come. Kids are going to go. All these things. You're going to inherit money. And you're going to need advice on how that impacts your liability management. So if you spend half your conversation reminding them of how much they're going to need you, that's where you're going to make your money. I mean, these concepts are so powerful. All right, back to this, because Todd led us right into this part of. Oh, Todd's
Can I add
got
one more
more.
thing
Let's
on?
go.
Because I'm just on one thing that you just said. Remember, 1 in 5 people in the United States say they have access to any financial advice at all from someone they trust. All right. People with a financial advisor, the number is lower than that. This is just in national surveys. Do you have someone you can go to for financial advice that you trust? 1 in 5 people say yes. It could be an uncle, it could be a dad, but think about that, right? So when you're asking someone, do you work with a financial advisor? That's important because you're right off the bat. You could follow that with, you have access to anyone that you go to for financial advice. That's actually another really valuable thing for you to know about that person, right? Because that's someone you may want to build a relationship with that you could talk to later. But if they say, yes, I have a person, or I have a CPA or a financial advisor, when you say, I'd love to talk to them, just to connect with them to make sure that we're doing all the right things, blah, 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 you've actually created a stickier client, because a client is less likely to leave you for someone else at a cheaper price if you've connected with any of their financial network, right? Schwab, this thing we learned, Schwab, Ameriprise, and stuff like that. Once you have a financial advisor, if the financial advisor reaches out to the CPA or anyone else in their network, that client stays much, much longer, because it feels like what? It's not a one-to-one connection. It's like a family. It's a relationship. So as much as you can, that's just, if you can find one more person in their community to talk to and network to talk to about any of this, you're creating a web, right? And a relationship that has many, many bonds to it.
Yeah.
I'll shut up.
That's beautiful. Sorry, I'm still okay. Return on. All right, so let's get to the return on the prepayment. And I'm going to now, by a little bit of design, maybe accident, we're going to transition into what I think a lot of you could do to add a lot of value to your databases right now for people who don't need mortgages, because that's the reality. A lot of people are sitting on their 3% mortgage and they still need value. They still need advice. If you're truly building clients for life, you need to obviously be a part of their life, right? And help them with money decisions. And the Borrow Smart concepts and steps and philosophies are just great, easy ways to reach out and connect with somebody to truly want to help them, so that when the time comes, right, they remember that you're their advisor right along the way. There are so many loan officers, using that term specifically, they're loan officers who don't talk to anybody until there's a reason to borrow money, period. And we can't be that. That's not what our industry needs. And we have all the tools here to do that. So this will be easy now, because we've already touched on this. If a client prepays a 7% mortgage that they have right now, they just took it out, let's say this year, in the last year, they're prepaying it by $200 each month. What's the return on that 200?
7%.
What? I'm kidding. Yes. So you got that. What if a client could invest that 200 earn 7%? Is that even possible right now, Todd? I mean, can people find a 7% return?
Sure.
their REIT's paying 17% interest right now, dividends.
So we don't have to go down that path, but you talk to a guy like Todd who truly studies the investment side of things, just because the client will say, where can I get 7% somewhere else? Or where can I get, that's what their first response always will be. If they know the rates are low, like back when the rates were at 3%, their question was simply, where should I put this money if I don't put it down in the house? It was just a different version of that question. So think about this from your annual reviews. Is everybody doing annual reviews for their clients, by the way? Consistently, monthly? Okay. How many homeowners out there, whether you help them into the house and help them borrow that money versus somebody else who's not even in the business anymore who helped them, or that person is in the business but hasn't talked to them in 3 years since they got them that loan, are sitting out there sending extra money towards their mortgage prepayment? It's at 3%. Do they know did they know these concepts? And this leads us to my favorite one with a cool graphic. Right, Todd? Right. So if somebody is prepaying a mortgage at 3, but could go stick it in a money market and earn 5, what's the liability asset gap just there, just right there?
2.
Yeah. So how many of them realize or have somebody in their ear saying you're actually losing 2% every month on your money?
0. They think they're making money. Nobody's telling them they're losing money.
I think they're making 3%, right?
And why do they think they're making 3%?
If they're not paying interest. They think they're paying less interest, right? That's
Because
what
the money's coming from a place that was earning
0
in their checking account. So they're benchmarking against the source of funding for the prepayment, which is checking, which they know is earning 0. So if I pay a 3% or 5% mortgage, I'm making
3 or 5.
5%. So think of the checking account we think of as a switching station it's like the place where all the money goes. When these flows from there, it could go somewhere else and earn 5 in Trevor's example, right?
Yep. And now that's easy. So this is for all those families across the country that aren't moving, which is why we have no inventory, because they've got this ridiculously low cost of borrowing, yet they're still doing the same things and they're prepaying that debt. I've had conversations sitting out in the snow camping lately and over the fire, drinking some Kool-Aid. And in 30 minutes, that person's like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. Why? Because they'll just kind of go to that. They know what I do. And they're like, I'm at 2.75 and I've been paying, Wells Fargo back extra hundreds of dollars every month. What? Oh my God. I mean, everybody is like that right now. And that's where you can step in and just assume the role as their certified liability advisor, because the next wave's coming, right? We got to get on the surfboard and be ready for it. And so this is a relevant conversation you need to be having right now with everybody. You can sound smarter and say, hey, this is what we call liability asset gap. A lot of people don't teach you this. Oh, your other lender didn't teach you this? What? That's always a good gut punch to make other people look bad if you want to go that path, but you don't have to. So let's, in time, return on home equity. So I pay the extra money down. I make 3% return or 7% return. Once it's in there and it just sits there is what we call house wealth, right? As a liability. That's the other way. We got to talk differently, right? You say home equity, everybody says home equity. We say house wealth because you need to think of it like an investment. Do we all understand, at least at the foundation, that home equity in and of itself earns 0 rate of return? Is everybody up to speed on that piece? Do you go there with your clients right now? Karen's kind of shaking her head. Jeff, do you go there?
It depends on the client, the situation.
Okay. So here's one of the pushbacks I always get. Well, what if I got my FHA client and all they have? Why would I talk about this? all they've got is their 3.5% down and the rest is coming from the seller, blah, blah, blah. Or they got to put the 20% down, like Todd mentioned earlier, to just get the house. I shift into coaching mode, advisor mode. I want to empower you with some of these concepts that don't maybe apply to you right now, but I want you to be empowered on how to make these decisions when, you know, your great grandmother passes away and you inherit $100,000. You will not know how to make this decision. Your friends are going to tell you to prepay the mortgage. So if you don't at least have a basic understanding of these things, obviously, number one, just call me so I can walk you through this, because we're going to have the same conversation: safety, liquidity, rate of return on what to do with that 100K inheritance. But I think what I've found is it's how easy you can make this conversation happen for somebody to kind of get it. And I actually had to learn it through teaching a lot of my own originators, because even people that have been in the, Carrie's smiling, even people that have been in the business a long time, they're going, I don't believe you, Trevor. You're kind of full of it right now. There's no way home equity doesn't actually earn a rate of return. Like, look how much money I just made on my own house, right? So I pull up a napkin and I kind of just pretend like if you're sitting across the table from somebody and you had just a napkin, I call it, hey, I've got a 3-step theorem. I was a math major. 3-step theorem to walk you through this, okay? Imagine you got that $800,000 house. You put your $400 down. You got $400,000 of house wealth, right? First, let's assume the house has no appreciation. The market doesn't help you out at all. Your $800,000 house 30 years from now is worth
$800K.
$800K, right? Just simple logic, just kind of walking them through it. They'll get stuck thinking it's a trick question. Okay, so unless the market goes up, let's pretend it doesn't, it's 800. Let's assume you could pay interest only for all 30 years of this loan. Like, you're never going to take any of your extra money that's already in your checking account and prepay it with any of that, even the minimum required. We're going to do interest only. What's your balance on that $400,000 loan 30 years from now?
400.
Okay. So what is the wealth in your house? It was 400K. What is it 30 years later? How much home equity or house wealth do you have?
400.
400. So this is all in the CLA, but I think it's super important that if you have a whiteboard, or you could pencil this out for somebody and just baby step them through this concept. This was the final, like, nail in the coffin, so to speak, cherry on top of why by the end of my consultations, every single person was like, can I do 0 down interest only? And they got all this money, right? I mean, they had plenty of money. Once, if you get really, really good at this, like, you know, 4th degree black belt type good, they don't want to put any money down in the house and they want to pay interest only. And back in the day, that was an option. And so then we would just, then you are in control saying, okay, well, there's still the cash flow piece, but now I'm in total control of the conversation. And I'm coming back in as the advisor. Like, now I've got you salivating over what could be and how to really make money with all these different ways to look at return. But now we live lives of cash flow. So I'll shift into that, right? And we'll kind of close the planning consultation around that. Like, let's put enough down to get you where you and your spouse aren't fighting about money, or, you know, you're losing sleep over that payment. But at least now you understand that anything beyond that logically may not make sense for you. Oh, thought Todd was he was just sneezing. Okay. So any thoughts on that? Just kind of baby stepping through and how to script that for a client, because after all the other stuff you kind of touch on, whichever ones are relevant for them, this is a concept I just want people to understand. Now let's talk about how you want to apply this into your current, you know, strategy and home buying decision. Thoughts, input.
Trevor, do you coach your team members to walk through every client with some sort of PowerPoint or some format that they're going through? I know there's the science and the art of it, so you really have to figure out what's appropriate for the different scenario, different client. But how do you suggest some of this information face to face?
I believe I got well, two of them are here. Stacy left. Everybody on my team has a PowerPoint that we walk clients through. I don't think you should ever do a consultation without a PowerPoint. But that PowerPoint will include mortgage-backed security updates to show that you've got your finger on the pulse. I mean, there's a lot of other pieces.
Yeah.
And then for my whole career, I would have certain Borrow Smart slides in there. I would have safety, liquidity, and return. I think it's, for one, until you really master it, it's your cheat sheets.
Yeah.
And that's why we have slides. So I don't forget to talk about something and I remember what I was supposed to say. But also it creates a better presentation, right? A better experience for the customer. What you have to be careful with, Jeff, that I see all the time is I'd walk into my office and I would see the clients here, my mortgage advisor here, and they're both just staring at the screen the whole time. And that's not the point of it, right? Now it's like we're not even really engaging. We're just staring at slides together. So I think if you get really good at it, you have the slides there because you choreograph out what the perfect client consultation would be, what the perfect Borrow Smart conversation would be. Like my methodology was I would let people know ahead of time with a kind of a templated email, say, hey, here's how the hour with me is going to go because I want it to be the most valuable hour you've ever had. The first 30 minutes, we're going to talk about money, goals, and they teach you some powerful concepts to make this hugely important decision. The second half is we're going to then take all that and dive into your real numbers. And that was like my mortgage coach or Borrow Smart analysis. So I let them know ahead of time, this was going to be a pretty epic 1 hour, especially because they were driving in usually at that point. You can do the same if they're going to hop on because this is an hour of their life that they are choosing with you. And they got 5 other lenders in their ear talking about rate. So you build up to this because you know what you're about to go deliver to them, that you're delivering value that nobody else can even come close to.
One other best practice, Jeff, that you can do as well is do a screen recording of you going through the Borrow Smart Lite conversation and have that be part of your early stage onboarding process. Like when you send them documents and things like that, send them that link and say, I'd like you to watch this before our appointment. That way, when they come in, you're unpacking what questions did you have from that or what stood out to you about that. And that way you've got plenty of time during your hour consultation. You don't get them sideways. You're just clearing up, but it can help again with the differentiations, part of your shock and awe. Wow, no one else sent me this. No one else gave me any of this to even think about. And I actually have a question or two, which means I want to meet with you to talk about my questions. I found back in when we were doing this at scale, we like to have this sort of really simplified and choreographed so that we could talk about their questions and not try to do this as part of the live, one-on-one stuff. Unless you're doing like Trevor does, where you get just a couple slides and maybe some things that are tailored to them. It can be a really cool part of your onboarding, but this could be a real differentiator for you and even why people want to work with you. A prospect that you're first starting to talk to, just walk them through it high level and have them go, I don't understand it, but this person does. So I want to work with them, right? If that's the only message they get, that's a really positive differentiator.
Yep. You can do, if you have BombBomb or some video app, what I did is I would record individual videos around each of the slides, the key slides. So Jeff, to your point, like what Todd's saying, 2 to 3 minute recording of you just talking about the safety slide. I mean, this is what I'm on right now. So just so you see, right? These are the actual slides that you all have access to. Slap your face and name at the very beginning, kind of your opening slide, have a call to action at the end. But do a 2 to 3 minute video on this slide. Do a 2 to 3 minute video on this slide. This is all your content. You're sending something out to financial planners, hopefully a couple times a month at minimum as you grow your list. This is all I would send. I would always, and I know we're going to talk about fast stuff separately, but it's all right here. Like one email out or video out is a case study or testimonial. The next one is a concept that we teach. So the advisor's like, wow, you talk about this stuff with your clients? Huh. That's I just back and forth on those two things. So my point that I wanted to make sure I wrap up with, and I know we're at our time, is
It's great.
who is out teaching this to groups right now? Any of you? Is that a zero? Is that a offer?
I signed up to do a 4-part series at our local library, but nobody showed up to any of the parts. So
Karen, that just means your marketing sucked. That's all.
Yeah.
So here, the content's not the problem. You're not the problem. We just got to figure out what the messaging is. That's totally good. At least way to try it. Yeah, now you just kind of look at like, what was your messaging? Was it clear on why they should come and what they would get out of it? Were you buying food? You know, that kind of thing. So I would encourage all of you, this has always been my biggest strategy, is getting in front of 5 to 20 people at a time. And if nobody shows up, it's just a marketing thing. That's all. Like, who owns real estate in this country doesn't need to know what we're talking about?
Not many.
The audience is infinite. I mean, so don't ever have doubts from that angle. Just get better at the marketing and drawing, getting people to like salivate over wanting to attend this thing, because it's not about you. It's not about the content. It's about the impact it will have for them to help them have a better, more successful financial future. And if you want to send me over any of your like, here's what I sent out and that nobody responded to, please do. I love just looking at that stuff and put my consumer hat on and just go, okay, what if you tweak that? Or what if you remove that line? What if you said this? I'm happy to do it. 5 minutes take me. So please do.
appreciate that.
Yeah. I think get your peers here to give you some feedback, because people will only show up if they feel like the value they're going to get in return is greater than the time they're going to have to invest to go there, right? That's just sales, especially if it's free. There's not a monetary exchange, but there is a time and value exchange. So for any event we're hosting, there's 89 other things I could do during that time. My job is to get you to believe that the time with me will be more valuable than those other 89 things. That's the whole job. And Todd's got, by the way, marketing ball. I don't know where that is, Todd, but where is marketing ball in the mentor stuff?
You're muted, Todd.
That's a mentor course 2.
Course 2. I don't know have you guys, Karen, have you seen that? Have you watched marketing ball? I always go back to that. By the way, it's something I also love teaching real estate agents, financial planners. I mean, I'm going to teach a little mini version of that at our event coming up in December here in Portland, because I think it's such as Todd's taught us over the years, we're all trying to jump from home base to third, and we're skipping first and second base, and right now it's about growing your audience, growing your awareness. And so marketing ball is such a good framework to go back to when you get out there, but also just for your own purposes. First, they know what you do, what makes you unique. Secondly is the event, right? A one-to-many chance to get to know you and have an experience with you. From that, a few will raise their hand. I want to sit down with you one-on-one if you have a good call to action and your presentation kind of moves the needle for the right people. That's the whole formula. Just wash, rinse, repeat over and over. Any other last minute questions? I know we're at the hour. Anything I can help with, since I was one sharing today?
Can we, you don't need to record this necessarily, but I was running like a mortgage coach on the side to show the 800 and then 20% down, reinvesting the difference, which obviously you have like net worth way more. But if you then do like whatever the loan payment for the 20% down is and subtract that on like a monthly basis from the reinvestment, then your net worth is less than. But I know there's also like taxes and other things. So I'm just wondering if there's like more that I'm missing to this. Can I share my screen real fast?
Well,
So you're doing leverage arbitrage, but then you're taking out the monthly payment also, right. And at the end, it doesn't look as good.
Yes. And so like, I know that there's like tax consequences and like other things that I'm not taking into account, and Mortgage Coach lets you do that. It's just a whole lot of things. I'm just wondering if so I only use 6% because I feel like that used to be, if you're not earning 6% on your money, like that's a concern. And it was easy because rates were like under 6. So I was like being conservative on the investment side, and simultaneously, like it still looked better because rates were so low. So obviously it's like a different situation now. But so I'm showing just like doing the lump sum of the difference. But
I
then, like
can't
I
see
said,
what
this
you're.
one,
Can other people
Can you
see what she's showing? I
Yeah.
just see
It's
myself.
kind of small.
okay, I don't,
I can see it fine.
Fine.
okay.
I'm just looking at you. What the heck?
I
Oh,
get
there we
that.
go. There we go.
Okay, so I did, this one is just taking the difference that you'd have left over if you didn't buy it in cash and investing it at 6%. And this is doing the exact same thing, but I'm subtracting out what the mortgage monthly payment is. And so, like I said, if you look at, like this number looks pretty, but this is a lot different. And
Yeah.
so if you look at like the net worth,
Let's
would
call
just
them
say-
2 versus 1 though.
so column 1 is cash, just buying the $800,000 in cash.
Oh,
The second one is buying it with 20% down and investing the difference at 6%. And then the third is that same exact situation, except for on a monthly basis from the investment account, you're pulling out what the mortgage payment would be. To try to be somewhat comparable, like what Karen was asking.
Todd, sorry I cut you off. You have at it. Let's.
I was
yeah.
just saying that let's not try to do this with
Yeah.
on a call. That this is so complicated. I've sent things in the mortgage coach about some of their assumptions. To even begin to like respond, I would have to know all of the assumptions for what you put in, and then I have to know if this is one of those things where they're calculating it in a different way than I would, or
Okay.
it's just so much for us to talk about. I don't want to lose the great sharing and learning that Trevor.
That's what I was saying. Like, if we want to stop recording, I don't mean to like, it's just something I've thought about it before. And like, when we're trying to like tie it full circle to the cash flow and to the investment, like I've wondered if there's like a good way to do that that
Yeah.
takes into account lag and everything else.
Well, there is, but it takes time and it's 3 o'clock, and I don't want to
Okay, that's fine.
start
I
this at
just,
3 o'clock because
yes.
I would want to start from blank and have everybody see each entry so they understand how it got built, so they could learn from it, and then we could talk about each of the assumptions. It's just starting from this. We can't work backwards as a group and get there, right?
Yep, that makes sense.
So the one thing I want to kind of close with is when you understand the concept of lag, right? Everyone that has a house has an opportunity. Like when the conversation I had more than any other 2 or 3 years ago was to friends of mine who paid their house off. And I said, do you realize your opportunity cost of money right now is 2.5% to 3%? You should be getting everything you can out of that house and locking in 3%. Because what happens when rates go up? When mortgage rates go up, all these other investments and things go up as well. So if you can lock in 2.5%, 3% money for 20 or 30 years, then if you can invest that, which you can now, I mean, T-bills at 5.5%, the average REIT's paying 8.5%. A lot of them are paying 12 to 15% because why they paying such a high return? It's the same return they were paying. It's just their stock prices come down a lot because they're hurt by rising rates. But that's the benefit. That's the cycle and the lag. But anyone that had an investment property, anyone that had a property that was nearly paid off, I'm like, when you get these opportunities, there's a conversation that you can have that's relevant to them at that time. And return in that situation was a big one. Also liquidity, right? Because you could do it at that time. If you do it now, you're locking in at 8%. Well, it's harder at 8% because now I'm benchmarking against 8%, which is not going to give you that same kind of a gap, right? So the more you get comfortable with these concepts and ideas, the more you'll start to see that they apply everywhere into so many different situations that the opportunity right now is different than one that we'll have in 3 years if rates are back down at 4% again. But it's still the same foundational framework of safety, liquidity, and return.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks for that. I just wanted to kind of wrap it up. And I'd love to, if you want to, Trevor, one of the things we could do with Angela is take a couple case studies. We could pull it up in Mortgage Coach. Let's just walk through building like the concept from scratch so I can see how we built it, what the assumptions are, like, is it after tax, pre-tax, because that makes a difference. Time value of money. Again, if you put 200,000 in investment versus 200 a month, you know, and that's the cash flow difference, you're going to have money is going to compound faster at 200,000 lump sum than it is at 200 a month because time value. So all of those things actually have an impact on wealth creation over time. But again, the art of the science is understanding the math. The art is, when is it relevant to somebody? Like, when should they know that? Because
and let's not forget though, we've already talked about safety and liquidity before any of this comes up. And there are plenty of people, we can't just assume anything. There are plenty of people, even if the real math starts to show like, I might be losing a bit, they're going, I'd still rather have the money somewhere where I have use and control of it for good or bad reasons.
Exactly.
Like when we start going down this too logical of a path and we don't apply it back to the big picture, our job in sales is, as they try to get us to zoom in, we have to keep them zooming out, because they making these huge money decisions. They just zoom in, and you know what they're zooming in on. They're zooming in on how much do you cost versus somebody else I know, who called me back first, how fast can I get my pre-approval letter. That's all zoom in stuff. The better we are at getting them to zoom out, and as Todd says, like, remember why we're doing this, why we're trying to get onto this train, even though it's slowed down, it's still rolling forward. We still got to get into that house, because that's the only way we're going to really create wealth for you and your family. Like, that's all the zoom out stuff. The zoom out stuff is the fact that this isn't going to be the numbers for 30 years, because you're borrowing at this point right now. As soon as we hit a strike rate, we're getting you down and all these numbers change, and we're going to revisit all of it. That's all they need to know usually.
Yeah.
So
say a 30-year rate is still typically temporary financing, right? Because we knew the average person only kept a 30-year mortgage for 5.25 years, right?
mm-hmm.
So people get locked into 30 years as permanent financing. And I'm like, no one keeps a mortgage for 30 years, because cycles, 3 to 5 year cycles, we see this happening. So the likelihood of them keeping it more than 5 to 7 years is typically very low. It gets extreme when you have what we had, where you had 3-4% money there for a while, but life events will still pull those people out of those rates in time. And if you look at the newsletter I sent out today, the very top graphic, that's what we're talking about, that a little bit, just how those cycles get sort of paid out. Why would you pay off a 2%, 3% mortgage? Because you have no choice. You're getting divorced, you're moving for a job, you need money. You just pay off a house, and then because someone bought it from you, right? You're paying down that debt on the old house that you had, and you're having to take out new debt. And so that cycle will reset itself.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that cycle, the next one.
Yeah, exactly. Good cycle.
All right, team.
Cool.
I
Everybody, this is
appreciate
awesome.
y'all. Thanks for
everyone
letting
for
me
coming.
share.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you.
Awesome.
No trouble.
Thank you.
See ya.
Friday.
Happy Friday.